Welcome to the Beyond High Performance podcast, featuring content and conversations from me, Jason Jaggard, along with our elite coaches at Novus Global, their high-performing clients, and the faculty at the Meta Performance Institute for Coaching. On this podcast, you'll hear some of the world's best executive coaches and high-performing leaders, artists, and athletes discuss how they continue to go beyond high performance in their lives and businesses.
So as a wide receiver, my job at its core was to go where the defense is not and make a play. And when I start to equate that to everything that I've done in business, everything that I've done, as a coach and as a mentor, it's really about, helping people understand and own what makes them unique.
Marques, thank you so much for being with us today.
I appreciate you having me. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Let's get right into it. We'll talk a little bit about your history as a Super Bowl champion NFL wide receiver. I think that's probably relevant to some of our audience who's listening to this. They'd prefer for us to talk a little bit about that. What's interesting, and I actually went and did some research, which was really fun studying you since we've known each other a little bit, where you gave a commencement speech at the University of New Orleans, and actually you're a professor there now, which I think is incredible. And you mentioned how in some ways, like crazy it was that I think the phrase you used was a skinny kid from Philadelphia could end up being one of the best football players that the New Orleans Saints ever had. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us about that journey? Because it's not like you were a rock star in high school. Is that right?
Yeah, it was a really unique journey. I was somebody that I was able to continue to develop along the way. And when I got to a different platform or a more advanced platform, was able to kind of rise to the occasion. So like my high school football experience, I joke, I don't think I think I was a no-star recruit. I'd never had a 100-yard season my entire high school career. I wasn't really a dominant high school football player, so when it came time to get recruited, I didn't have a ton of schools calling. I ended up with a handful of schools that were interested, two schools in particular that wanted to offer me a scholarship. One was a small college in New York that wasn't really known for its football program, Hofstra University, and the other one was University of Missouri. And conventional wisdom would have said that, take the Big 12 offer at the time, go to the place that offers big time college football and take a shot there.
Yeah.
But I kind of knew at that time that I needed to develop, and the opportunity at Hofstra was one that it just felt like a better fit. I knew it would give me a chance to develop at the pace that I needed to develop. At the time, it was some really, really talented football players there that were just kind of under the radar that I knew I could learn from. So I ended up going to Hofstra, and it was, again, one of those situations. I came in as a skinny freshman at like 175 pounds. And every year I was able to continue to get better. I was able to, just soak in as much information as possible from the coaching staff, from the veteran players around me. I ended up, just because of injury, starting, the last couple games of my freshman year, and I never looked back. Was kind of thrust into a leadership role as a sophomore. And, I hung my hat on just, if I can continue to get better every week, every game, every year, eventually I'll get to where I want to be.
So, and then where you got is extraordinary. So I want to rewind a little bit. So what made you want to be a football player in the first place? I mean, you weren't, like you said, you weren't the best, but you were good. I mean, if people are writing you letters saying, "Hey, we'll give you money to play sports," you're not bad. So where would you have said you are in like the tiers of the high school you were playing at?
I mean, I was like, our high school wasn't a powerhouse, so that always helps when you playing, the powerhouse schools. You're going to have more eyes on you. We weren't a powerhouse school. I played receiver. We ran like a run heavy offense, so I didn't get a ton of opportunities. I was somebody that was just more raw talent at the time. The talent was somewhere in there. I didn't get a ton of opportunities to really refine it and really build on it. So Hofstra ended up seeing something in me that I hoped was there. I knew in the back of my mind was there, but wasn't able to get a ton of opportunities to show other people that it was there.
Yeah. And that's fascinating because even two things I'm thinking about as we're talking. One is oftentimes hidden talent looks like above averageness,
Hmm.
and so I love that someone saw the like my guess is if you were average or below average, you wouldn't get any letters. Is that how that is that how
Yeah,
that works?
pretty accurate.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were above average, you were good, but someone saw greatness in you. And then I actually think it's really brilliant. I'm curious how you made that decision about not choosing to go to Mizzou. Y- I like the description that you gave, and the reason why this is relevant for our listeners is oftentimes I think people aspire to just jump into the majors, or
Hmm.
they're thinking about, at least I do this sometimes. I'm thinking about the fastest way to get somewhere, and I think the fastest way to get somewhere is just to go there immediately. But
Yeah.
you chose like a more developmental approach. Was someone coaching you through that, or was that intuitive for you? Like, how did you know to do that?
No, in a lot of ways, people were coaching me against it.
Really?
I had friends of dads of friends that I had playing that they looked at me like I was crazy. And at the time, just to give you a little context,
Yeah.
I lost my father when I was in the first 2 weeks of my freshman year in high school. And my father, he was the reason. He was kind of the catalyst and the reason why I played football. He was a former athlete himself.
Mm.
He was my coach all throughout Pop Warner and all throughout youth football. And he was the reason, and he was really the foundation of my belief in myself. He was the foundation of where I got my work ethic from. So, having that kind of an upbringing, I wasn't afraid of hard work. When it came down to making that decision, it was really just me, my mom, and my family, just trying to work through what's best for me, not what's best for, my buddy that thinks that, I can go play in the Big 12. What's best for, what's going to happen, potentially 4 or 5 years down the road with NFL. Like what's the best situation for me right now? It took a little bit of self-awareness to and really being comfortable in who I was and what I knew I was capable of
Hmm.
to kind of take that road less traveled. And like I said, I was fighting against a lot of the people that I thought were in my corner. And it was the first situation of it was kind of a precursor for me. Sometimes the bandwagon kind of thins out, and you're on an island by yourself, and you got to make it happen.
In terms of like just knowing how to make decisions that are right for you versus following the crowd or things like that. Is that what we're talking about?
For sure,
Yeah.
absolutely, yep.
Now, just a few more questions about this because I really do love this part of your story, and I think it's rich for leaders who are transitioning or even younger leaders who are making decisions. When you made that decision, and you mentioned a second ago, thinking 4 or 5 years out, at that time, were you still committed or expecting to or hoping to get into the NFL? And this was a part of that strategy, or was this a hedge or kind of thinking more holistically versus just that one path?
No, that was the end point.
That
Like
was the
the end point was not changing. I would always joke with my mom at the time, and she would give me that look like you better chill out. But I would always tell her that playing in the NFL was my plan A, and my plan B was that plan A was going to work.
I love that. And so your decision to go to a lesser known, smaller school was tailored towards you making it in the NFL. So it wasn't like saying, "Hey, go someplace more realistic." It wasn't
Mhm.
saying, "Hey, go where it's safer." In terms of your goal, it was a more dangerous pick. But I'm putting some words in your mouth, and correct me as I do that. Like you wanted to go to a place where you could develop and shine versus go to a place that might consume you and you might get lost and where you wouldn't be developed and you'd just be one of many other people. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. I mean, I saw guys that chased the big schools, that got in there, they got kind of washed, got washed away. You get in as a freshman, you redshirt, you wait around a couple years, you finally get to play as a junior or a senior, and you just kind of limit your opportunities to show what you can really do. Versus the path that I took, it was the one that was a little bit less traveled, but I knew that I was maybe 3 or 4 steps away from where I wanted to be. And, that path gave me a chance to play and get on the field earlier. And, I've always been a proponent of, if you can learn in the fire, that's the best way to learn. And, going there and having a chance to play early, figure out exactly where I needed to get better, where I needed to improve.
Yes.
When you can get that information, that real-time data, it just makes the journey a lot more tangible. You can touch it and you can feel it.
Yeah, and you can grow a lot faster. You can rapid iterate. Like it sounds
Right.
like in the firm we call it just getting more reps, like just getting in there, and that's what you chose the place where you're going to get the most amount of reps.
No doubt about it.
That's incredible. And I think that's incredibly strategic, by the way, Marcus. And I think that we're going to see that play out in every area of your life. But so let's go ahead and fast forward. So now you're in college and you're growing. What's the step towards the NFL? How'd you do playing college ball, and then who noticed you, and how did it go from there?
Yeah, I stepped into, like I said, as a freshman, I stepped in and played, I think 3 or 4 games. I got a chance to start. I played pretty well. Actually, my first ever start was my first ever 100-yard game.
Wow. Wow.
So, moved into my sophomore year. I had an off season to really work on my body, work on all the holes that I knew I had in my game. So I came into my sophomore year, probably 20 pounds heavier, a little faster, a little stronger. Put together, a solid campaign, but really went through the same formula. I had a solid year. I figured out where the holes were, got back in the lab in the off season, came in my junior year, another 20 pounds heavier, a little faster, a little stronger. And that was, in a lot of ways, that was the best campaign that I put together, strongest campaign I put together. And by the end of my junior year, I was starting to pop on the radar of NFL teams, and going into my senior year, I had a lot of momentum going, and personally, I was feeling really good about the path, and I got into training camp. Throughout the summer, my shoulder was bothering me a little bit, but I got into training camp. Like the first couple of weeks of training camp, I figured out that my shoulder was really a lot more messed up than I thought it was. And actually had to have surgery, and ended up having to sit out what would have been my first senior year.
Wow.
So that was an interesting time for me.
Yeah, that's a euphemism. Interesting is in like disappointing, like painful. Like what was that like?
It was painful because when you think about it, like a lot of the class that I came in with as freshmen, I wasn't going to graduate with those guys.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I built this whole trajectory, this whole momentum going into my senior year, and there's so much excitement behind that. And then all of a sudden it's like a balloon is popped.
Yeah.
So that was a time that really challenged me mentally, really challenged me emotionally. And it's funny. It's a time that a lot of people don't really know about in my story. But it was that time where I had to look myself in the mirror and really articulate how important that goal of getting to the NFL was to me.
And just so our audience can empathize a little bit with this. So you've given everything. I mean, this is a singular focus. This isn't a hobby. This isn't an interest. This isn't even really a passion. This is like an obsession. And then all of a sudden your body will not cooperate with you, and you're watching other people move ahead of you.
Yeah.
And you've got to make a decision. I'm assuming, were there people telling you, hey, maybe it's time to hang up the spurs. Maybe it's time to study math or something, or whatever people say.
Yeah. I mean, it was one of those things where it wasn't, it was an injury serious enough that I had to miss a season, but it wasn't career threatening. Okay. Right. So I had that kind of in my back pocket. I knew that I would be able to recover from it. But you hit it on the head. Like this is a 3-year process, right? Where I stayed on campus year round. I only went home on major holidays. I was there for winter sessions. I was there both summer sessions every single year. Right. So this was a 3-year progression, a 3-year buildup to get to this moment where I can really go out and shine and show what I can do as a senior. And for that moment to just kind of disappear, that was a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah. Now, this is going to feel a little shifting without the clutch, but there's a phrase that you've used a couple of times that probably audiences who understand how college sport works and even professional sport works may be familiar with. But I think there's some gold here for leadership development. You've mentioned the phrase campaign, like you put together a campaign. What does that mean? What does it mean to put together a campaign as a college athlete?
to get to the professional level, you can't be a flash in the pan.
Okay.
Right. You have to be able to put together consistent success and a consistent progression that shows that you started at point A and you were able to climb the ladder and get to point Z.
Okay.
So the campaign is really about how consistently can you perform and how consistently can you get better from game to game, from season to season, and ultimately start in one place as a freshman, in one place as a senior. And that trajectory is really what kind of gets judged as you are being evaluated for the next level.
So then when you're putting together a campaign, is it a 4-year campaign, or do you break it down into years? Are there KPIs? And if so, what are those KPIs? And are there spreadsheets? Like, how strategic are you around all this?
It's a very informal process. And it's really rooted in two things. It's rooted in how it's kind of this self-concept versus external brand conversation, okay. Right? You gotta be self-aware enough to know like where you stand at any given point. And you got to be self-aware enough to know that if you want to get to point Z, are you starting at point A or are you starting at point L? So you got to understand where you're at in your own progression. But at the same time, you got to know how you're being seen from the evaluator's perspective. So it's kind of this constant balancing act of, I know I have to objectively and really with a lot of candor, I really have to know where I'm at. But I also got to know what everyone else is looking for. And I got to try to marry those two things up. So that's really what the campaigns are about is like from season to season. I know that if I can objectively evaluate how I did as a freshman, I know that I've got to get off the press better. I know that I've got to work on my speed and in and out of my routes. I've got to know that I got to start to read coverages better and start to be able to anticipate. So those are the things that I can really hone in on when I get back into the lab in the off season and start to improve. So that coming into the sophomore campaign, what they want to see is, are you getting better and are you taking your weaknesses? And every year, do you have different weaknesses?
Yeah. So do they actually look at year over year growth as a way of kind of projecting into the future? Okay, this is what this athlete may do in the NFL.
Absolutely. And specifically, in my case, coming from a smaller school, I didn't have the advantage of going to an LSU or Alabama where I can put together 3 games and 3 games gets me on the draft board.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. I had to consistently put together success. I had to consistently put together seasons and campaigns that positioned me as a riser. There's no splash in the pan guys coming from Hofstra.
Yeah, and that's brilliant. In some ways, you picked the harder. I mean, not in some ways. You picked the harder way that was going to produce a better athlete.
Yeah, it's looking back on it and in hindsight, you're spot on, because the hardest thing to do in sports and really in life in general is to sustain success. And when you can get to a place where you reach, you reach a pinnacle that you feel is successful. The hardest thing to do is make that shift from being the hunter to being the hunted. And, if you can figure out throughout your life how to replicate all of the things that got you to that pinnacle, to get you to the next pinnacle and the next pinnacle, that's where you start to position yourself in a way that, you're able to not only sustain the success, but you're able to kind of rewrite and redefine what success looks like for yourself.
Now, and that's a perfect segue into and I am skipping some parts, and maybe we could do this again. We can flesh them out because there's so much richness in your story and so much, I think, wisdom for leaders of any stripe. When people make it to the NFL, is there a sense of I have arrived, or is there a sense of it has begun? Like, what do you think is going on in the mind of most athletes when they finally make it to the NFL?
It's a really interesting mix. Yeah. You have the guys that come in and they feel like they've arrived, and that's the destination, right? Being drafted is the destination. They've reached their goal.
Yeah.
And, in a lot of ways, those are the guys that you see come in that have all the talent in the world, but they don't have the mental makeup to understand that Now the journey just starts.
Yeah. You thought it was hard before.
Right. I mean, this is you're coming from a place where, there's scholarships on the line, and there's meal points on the line.
Yeah.
And you're entering into a world where if I don't have this job, I don't feed my family.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a different level of intensity. So, but on the other side, you have the guys that really understand that, okay, this is the opportunity. Getting drafted gives me an opportunity to really show and really compete at the highest level. And those are the guys that are able to go out, put together solid careers, put together, the Hall of Fame careers, because they understand that it's all a proving ground.
Yeah.
Right. And no year is the next year is not promised. The next play is not promised. It's all part of this opportunity that you get to compete.
Now, and I love that phrase. You have these great isms, by the way. I hope this makes it into your coaching and consulting work, like building campaigns. Like, I'm already thinking about how to, like, even in our firm and our teams, how do we build campaigns and help people grow, and what are their metrics and those types of things. It's really fun to talk to you. The other thing you just mentioned is like a Hall of Fame career. When you got into the NFL, was that, now that you've made it, did you move the chains to that goal, like the Hall of Fame career, or is it more of an incremental thing? Like, did you think in your mind, I'm here to be a Hall of Famer? How'd that work for you?
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't use that terminology. And I can get into that, in a totally different conversation, because the Hall of Fame is judged by, people that I wouldn't necessarily choose to pick as Hall of Famers. So
it's not a pure talent conversation, is what you're saying.
No, there's a lot that goes into that decision making. But I will say this: my goal coming in was to leave the game as one of the best to ever do it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like, as you set goals, and as I set my goals coming into the league, I knew that I had to set that goal, like that stretch goal, way out there, that this is how I want to end up. Because what it helped me do is it was kind of my North Star. Right. So as I set my goals from week to week, season to season, they were always in alignment with that North Star. And again, it just, my whole journey is really about the trajectory, and, figuring out what is the thing that you really want to achieve, you're really passionate about achieving.
Yeah. And
how can you put together the steps to build the foundation to get there? Because it's not going to be an overnight thing.
And then what did the rewards look like as you're on that journey? Like, do you celebrate, or do you just push on? Like, how do you stay motivated when you're doing the week to week thing or year to year thing, season to season thing?
It's a balancing act. Like, you got to have fun. You got to have fun while you're in the process. And, for me, a lot of that was, winning makes everything fun. Right?
Oh, yeah.
When you're able to, put it all out on the field, and your team can come home with a win, it's fulfilling in a way that it makes it fun, right?
Yeah.
But it's a lot of it too is if in your heart of hearts that you're progressing towards that stretch goal, that's where a lot of the fulfillment and the fun comes from. I wasn't somebody that really enjoyed the lifestyle or like that. None of that stuff was really important to me. The fun for me was like, I'm here to do a job. I'm here to do a job at the highest level. And, that's where I'm having fun. When I'm playing at the highest level and I can compete against the people that I look up to as competitors.
Yeah.
And really go out, because I know iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
Like, when I can go out and do that, like that's when I'm having fun.
Yeah. I love that. Were there times, I know that you probably hate losing, but were there times when you lost, but there was still the satisfaction of the growth? Did those things ever coexist for you?
Eventually.
That's a good answer. After you got over the loss?
Yeah, because that was the process. That was the weekly process, right? I'm sure people have heard this in post-game interviews, win or loss, more often than a win. People like to say it, but there's a 24-hour rule, right?
What's that?
Win or loss, you kind of digest it, and you get back in the lab and you figure out how to move forward. And what you learn in sports, and really again in life, because I think the two are more parallel than a lot of folks tend to realize, is you learn more in a loss than you do in a win.
Yeah.
Right. That's why it's so hard to beat a team, 2 times in a row. Right.
Yep.
Because the team that lost the first game, they have all of if you lose the game, there's obviously things that did not go right.
Yeah.
Right. So you have the tangible things that you can go in and fix and try to repair, versus if you win, there may be some insights that you have that went well, but that adversity is not as visible to you.
Yeah, I was told one time that teams are almost like immune systems, and so they get exposed to a virus, which is another team or something, and then when it beats them, the immune system comes back stronger.
Mm-hmm. No doubt about it. I've never heard the immune system analogy, but that's a really good one, because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Okay. So now you're in the NFL, and in some ways, Marques, I'd love to hear your thoughts on your experience with other high performers. They're the best in the world at what they do. A lot of the people listening to this podcast are elite performers, high performers in their disparate fields.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, as you were playing alongside these folks, and even for you personally, you don't have to throw anyone under the bus, but what is it that you saw that most often got in the way of people who are at the best of what they do?
There were times where even myself, when you start performing at that high of a level, you become obsessed with it. And through that obsession, sometimes you lose that counterbalance.
What's the counterbalance?
And like I can just speak from my perspective.
Yeah.
For my first 3 or 4 years, I was all consumed with football.
Yeah.
Like year round. I felt like if I had a thought about doing something else, I felt like I was cheating on the game. And through that obsession, yes, I was able to get and gain a ton of insights around my performance on the field, off the field. But that counterbalance is like, what are the things that actually make me whole? What are the things that, from a holistic standpoint, it might not be intuitive that it actually makes me a better player and a better performer, but what are those things that I'm missing out on? Is it just being able to unplug? Is it just being able to be mindful and enjoy some downtime and enjoy some relaxation and recovery? Is it, eventually I started to venture into business opportunities.
Yeah.
And what I started to find is that the more that I was able to find that counterbalance, and the areas where I was able to unplug from like the maniacal preparation for one thing, the more I was able to take insights that were more tangential and apply them to the game.
Yeah, sorry. So that has a counterintuitive brilliance to it. 2 quick thoughts. One was, I had a mentor of mine say a couple of years ago, Jason, if you don't take a vacation, I'm not going to be your mentor anymore.
Right.
And his point was, you have no idea how much of a deficit you are to your team if you don't take a break.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really pivotal for me. Now, would you say, Marques, that counterbalance, how did the counterbalance, finding those other things, impact your game?
It actually, in a funny way, when I was away from it, it allowed me to miss it. So when I would take breaks, and interestingly enough, like I found this out by accident. I ended up with an off-season surgery where I was rehabbing and I couldn't train.
You were forced.
So I was forced.
Yeah.
So I had to find other ways to occupy my time and occupy my brain. And what I started to find is that it was more of a holistic approach to building myself as a person and as a performer, than just really focusing in on this one area of my life. And it kind of started to give me a different perspective, to where the importance of the game and the importance of what that game meant in my life, it didn't change, but you can have other things be important too.
Yeah. And in some ways I would imagine, well, at least I've heard as folks create disparate hobbies and things like that, it actually makes them more creative.
Mm-hmm.
That allows them to bring that energy back to the game. And for you, obviously, I mean, what's the average length of a football career? It's not super long.
Yeah. It's like 3.5 years.
I didn't realize it was that short. And
Yeah.
so in some ways, was that fortuitous for you? Because you've done a fantastic, and I want our audience to know you've done a fantastic job pivoting out of being the best at one area of domain experience into other domains. And I think that's probably unusual for anyone, but certainly athletes sometimes struggle to make that transition. Did that off time or that counterbalance prepare you for life after sport?
It's directly tied to my ability to transition, because being forced to start early while I was still really at the height of my career. Like I said, I was 4 years in to
Yeah.
a 10-year career. So, being forced to start there, and I got to shout this out. Just being fortunate enough to have two advisors in my corner that were really challenging me to kind of think outside the box. And
Mm.
one in particular, his thing is, you got to start with the end in mind.
Mm.
All right. So those two factors in my life were really pivotal in helping me get jump started when I was still at the height of my career, and being able to do those two things in parallel really helped me see how parallel those paths were.
Yeah.
And being able to pull insights from one side to the other and have them be like directly applicable. It was a game changer for me.
So then, you mind me asking who those advisors were? How did you find them? How did they find you? What did that relationship look like?
Yeah, they were actually my financial advisors at the time.
That's awesome.
I still one's become my best friend. Another I work with in business today, and they were former players themselves.
Hmm.
So it was just a really, really good opportunity to see from them firsthand. They had played, one played 10 years, one played 11 years, transitioned into a successful second act as financial advisors. So I got a chance to see what the transition looked like, what it looked like successfully. And just having those guys through their wisdom and their experience, just kind of pushing me, helping me navigate that minefield. It was a game changer. That's the only way I can put it.
I love that. And even just to our listeners, how many friends do you have who are 1, 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of you? Like, where do you want to be? And are you spending any time with anyone who's further ahead than you are where you want to be? That's one of the easiest ways to guide your life. And it sounds like, and I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it sounded like that just happened for you, and it ended up being one of the best things that could happen to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't claim the reason that it happened. But I will say that in hindsight, it's become something that it's how I intentionally move forward now. Having that experience and knowing how important those two guys were in my progression. I'm very mindful and intentional about, trying to pay it forward and create that same impact for folks that are really looking for, new and innovative ways to be the best version of themselves.
Well, and so that, speaking of, so then you're an entrepreneur. You've got investments in healthcare, tech. You're a professor now, which is fun to say. And your entrepreneurial gifts aren't just you invested in franchises and things like that. And I wish we had more time to talk about those things, but I want to be respectful of your time. So I want to the way you mentioned just giving back and investing in future generations. I would love to hear you talk about, and this is a shared passion. You're farther ahead than I am, but this is a shared passion of ours. Talk to us about entrepreneurialism and talk about your work with younger leaders around the area of entrepreneurialism. I'd love to hear you talk about that.
For sure. It's something that, working with younger and up and coming leaders is something that it's really a passion point for me, just because I was somebody that I never really saw myself as a quote unquote leader, on my teams or I'm not your prototypical leader. That's the rah guy in the middle of the huddle, getting everybody going. But the ability to try and lead through action and lead through intention is an area that I really focus in on with up and coming leaders. Because at the end of the day, you don't hear a lot of talk and you don't hear a lot of rhetoric around. There are multiple ways to lead. And, I think that, there is this perception and this view of what leadership looks like. And one of the things that I really try to focus in on is that you can lead in your way, in your uniqueness, and create the same impact as anyone else that leads in the typical or the prototypical way.
Yeah, and I wonder how many people disqualify themselves from the identity of leader because it doesn't look like everybody else. And you and I actually haven't talked about this. Is that a part of your coaching consulting? So everyone should know who's listening. Marques, along with a lot of other things, he does coaching and consulting. I want to say on the side because everything is it's on the plate, not on the side. It's on the plate. Is that a part of your work with business leaders?
Absolutely, and it's the thing that's starting to take up more and more room on the plate.
That's fun
because as I get into it, it's really, again, when I look back at my life experiences and my journey, it's the thing that is so transferable, and it's the thing that has allowed me to get into this space. It's the thing that's allowed me to get into really every space that I've gotten into, and interestingly enough, what I call it is the thing that I made a living doing, which is creating separation.
Yeah, tell me about that. I like it when you said that the last time. Go ahead, keep going.
So as a wide receiver, my job at its core was to go where the defense is not and make a play. And when I start to equate that to everything that I've done in business, everything that I've done, as a coach and as a mentor, it's really about helping people understand and own what makes them unique. Whether it's their skills, their abilities, their life experiences, their perspective. When you can own your uniqueness and tie it to your core values and your passion, there's no one in the world that can do that to the level that you can do that. And once you can understand and articulate what that is, now you can position it to go out and create your own separation within your work, within your career trajectory, within your school. Like when you really understand how you can use your uniqueness, it puts you into a mode where you can now seek out opportunities where it fits. And that's, again, I made a living doing that, playing receiver, and they would draw a play on a playbook and it would look a certain way, but when I actually got out on the field and had to execute it, I had to use what I had. I had to use my physical ability. I had to use my mental ability to kind of anticipate and see what's coming and understand the situation that I was in at any given point, and all of those different factors. I was able to move and process all those different factors because I always understood who I was and how I was going to execute in my strength.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of at the core of everything that I'm doing right now.
And I feel like that's something you continue to model as your uniqueness for business savvy, learn in going to George Washington University, getting your MBA, pursuing those things. It's fun to watch you continue to reinvent yourself. It's inspiring to continue to watch you invent yourself and create separation in everything that you do. One last question for you. Talk to us a little bit about what does it look like for you investing in kids and high school students? I believe you're working with some high school students and even at the college level. Talk to me about that kind of thing, like the next generation. What are you doing with them?
Yeah, it's really a lot of the same work, and it's what I've started to realize is that I really started my work with athletes, in the professional world, and the more that I work with professional athletes, the more that I realized that eventually I wanted to get downstream, because there's an opportunity within youth sports, particularly at high school sports, particularly. To really get in and start to drive home this mindset that the things that you're doing right now to position yourself as an elite athlete are the same exact things that you can do to position yourself as unique, whatever you want to be.
Yes.
And, that's really at the core of my work with young people is really trying to help them unlock that mindset, unlock that possibility for themselves that otherwise we have a tendency as adults to kind of put people in boxes.
Yes.
And, you know, being able to work with that demographic and that age group, and really being able to tear the ceiling off of those boxes. And look, I mean, if you can work and you can position yourself for the ultimate in one area, then why can't you position yourself for the ultimate in every area?
Yeah, I love that. It's seeing the transferable skills. Everything's transferable. Everything's transferable. Mm-hmm. And I think that you've modeled that. You've done a great job of that. And I want to thank you. One, thank you for a couple of things I want to thank you for. And then I'm going to ask where can people like find you on all the things. But every time I've talked with you, I sense your genuineness. Frankly, I sense your brilliance. I really, really love your strategic mind. Every time we talk, it's just fascinating for me to see how you think, how you position yourself, how you create separation in the things that you're up to. And you're always very generous with me when we get to talk, and I'm grateful for that. And also, you're a husband and a dad, and it's always fun talking about that. And I just really love how you have intentionally developed a holistic lifestyle that I think is worth admiring and emulating. So thanks for being on our show. Where can people find you if they want to like get to know more about what you're up to?
You can find me on all the social channels, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook at my handle is just my name. Mm-hmm. And my website is marquescolston.xyz.
I love it.
XYZ. I'm still creating separation even in the domain.
I love it. We'll put all those notes in our show notes. And again, Marques, thanks so much for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, man.
I appreciate you having me, man, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
I love that idea.
All right.